Shaylee and Yahav met in acting school. She remembers watching him perform a monologue and thinking how charismatic he seemed. In 2016, Shaylee was in a terrible car accident and suffered significant injuries. For a long time, she was in a wheelchair and she still walks with a cane. At first, Shaylee was embarrassed to leave the house with her cane, and she found herself avoiding going out. Until one day, Yahav said, "Sweetie, what are you trying to prove? Let's go out and buy a cane in every color." And so they did. And she had a purple cane and a gold cane and a blue cane, and he even bought her one that had a carved skull on top, and she felt like she was a villain in a play when she would use it. At 6:30 the morning of October 7th, 2023, Shaylee and Yahav awoke in their home in Kfar Aza to the red alert sirens. Their 1-month-old baby, Shaya, began to cry for her bottle. They ran for their shelter and crouched inside as they heard the terrorists outside shouting and laughing. She remembers, "We motioned to each other and made an agreement, barely whispering, 'You hold the door, I've got the baby.'" The terrorists pried the metal window open, and Yahav signaled to Shaylee to run. For a brief moment, Shaylee and Yahav locked eyes, and then Shaylee ran for her life, holding their baby as Yahav grappled with the terrorists coming through the window. That was the last moment that Shaylee saw Yahav alive. Shaylee and Shaya survived the next 30 hours because of a mix of sheer luck and human kindness. Shaylee ran as fast as she could and hid in a garden shed, and then found shelter with neighbors who took her in at great risk to themselves, as a crying baby is a ticking time bomb when you're hiding from terrorists. Shaylee writes, "Yahav sacrificed his life so that Shaya and I could save ourselves. He went up to the window and fought the terrorists to give us time to run. I think he must have realized I wouldn't be able to run so fast because of my legs, so he tried to hold them off. It's as if he told himself, it's either me or my baby. We had an agreement there in that room when the terrorists broke in. You hold the door, I've got the baby." That was our agreement, and it's still going on. He's still holding the door. He'll be holding that door for the rest of my life. And I've still got the baby. And as long as I'm here with the baby, I'll never let my light go out. I have to keep going. We have to keep going. And now we have more reason to hope that peace is coming for Israel and for Gaza. Still, for those who bear the losses of that dark day, October 7th does not fade into memory. They are still living in October 7th, 2023. This morning, the second Yortzeit of October 7th, we gathered together holding immense joy alongside our grief. We come to Yizkor holding our own individual losses alongside those of the Jewish people, alongside those of our broken and bruised world. We come together holding stories, the stories of those that we have lost. When Rachel Goldberg-Pollen spoke a few days ago, she quoted Kohelet, the book we read during the holiday of Sukkot, which tells us there's a time for every season. Today, Rachel says, we are being asked to digest all of those seasons at the exact same time, to weep and to laugh, to hug and at the same time to hold back from hugging, to be silent and at the same time to speak, to cry and at the same time to dance. We want and we need to celebrate, and we will dance with the Torah this evening. And yet, there is so much grief. This morning, we hold that grief by remembering. We remember the stories of those that we have lost. Today, we remember the victims of October 7th, and we also remember all of our lost loved ones. I am remembering today a personal loss, that of my father-in-law, John Posner, who died in a hospital room in Portland, Oregon, on the morning of October 7th, 2023, as the brutal attack on Israel unfolded. Today is John's Yortzeit. When John was 9 years old, his mother, Anne, an accomplished poet and a lawyer, committed suicide. I tell you this morning because it's the way that John would have started his life story. John spent 60 years of his life hiding the fact of his mother's suicide, perhaps to make other people comfortable, or perhaps because from a young age he was made to feel some unspoken shame about his family's history. But at some point later in his life, he came out of the closet, so to speak, and he actively fought against the stigma associated with mental illness and suicide. He would talk about Anne at the drop of a hat to anyone who would listen. He talked about it a lot, as if making up for lost time. He needed to speak his truth, and it is in reverence to that spirit of truth that I share it with you. In becoming an oncology doctor, John found a way to transform his psychic wound into purpose. In medicine, he found that the psychological trauma of his early loss provided him with a superpower. He could sit with deep darkness and not just touch it for a moment, but really stay present, not give up. He was not afraid of grief where others were. John became an oncologist because, as he told me, at that time, cancer patients were the sickest patients, the ones that no one wanted to be around. John wanted to be around them, to help them and their families, and he did this sacred work for 40 years. How do we make his memory, the memories of all those that we have lost, a blessing? We tell stories. Yahav's memory is a blessing every time we tell the story of how he bought Shaylee a cane in every color, and of Shaylee and Yahav's agreement. You hold the door, I've got the baby. And my father-in-law, Jonathan's father's memory, is a blessing every time we tell the story of his merchant marine days, of how he devoted himself to caring for his patients, or how later in life he turned his passionate spirit towards weightlifting in absurd ways that still make us laugh and roll our eyes. Today, I want to ask you to turn to the person next to you in a moment. And if you don't have a person next to you, as many don't, I'll ask you to get up and find a person to sit next to you in Chavruta, because we are going to take a few moments before we say Yizkor to tell a story. I'll ask you to take 2 minutes each to tell your Chavruta one story of a person that you are remembering today. One story, 2 minutes each, and then we will come together to say Yizkor prayers. But right now, I will ask you to gather together and tell a story to make the memory of your loved ones a blessing.